Have we or have we not got an early game of the season contender? Newcastle at home to Liverpool, losing 3-2, but in a more than respectable and commendable effort on their part, considering they were down to 10 men for 45 minutes plus, with Anthony Gordon going off the field, fighting back from 2-0 down to bring it to 2-2. If it wasn't for the young lad from Liverpool, getting that winner in the last minute would have got a more than acceptable point from the game. But Liverpool showing why they are champions, showing that fight, that spirit, that determination, tenacity to get the win in the end, despite showing a lot of flaws that put the game in the balance more than it ever really should have. And made some silly mistakes, lost out on a lot, and to be honest, were physically outmatched for the majority of the game against Newcastle. Eddie Howe can hold his head high, the players on the pitch can hold their heads high. They gave it a fantastic effort, and to be honest with you, I will still say we're the better team. But when you are a team like Liverpool that have the quality that they do, sometimes you just get those little bits of luck that other teams don't because of that. You get points in games maybe you don't deserve to, and that is just sometimes the way the cookie crumbles in football. Don't always get what you deserve, but you get what you get. And being one of the best means you get a lot. But we'll go on to the Newcastle attacking phase first of all and see how that went. As you can see here, Newcastle are in their sort of 4-3-3 with the two fullbacks pushed high and wide, Livramento and Trippier. The centre-back split, also allowing space for Nick Pope to move into the middle of them and help play out. Nick Pope isn't the most composed goalkeeper in the world while playing out. I'm pretty sure we all know that by now. So generally when he was on the ball, it would be to go long, and it was a bit of an old-fashioned throwback, to be honest with you. It was just a lot of direct passing, back and forth, going direct, hitting it to the front men, looking for second balls. Very Barclays, very, very Barclays. And how they used that to also go direct was sort of one and the same a bit. And where they got their opportunities was down to the way Liverpool pressed the game, which it felt like they adapted a few times and nothing ever really seemed to work. It felt like no matter how they tried to press against Newcastle, they were always surrendering space and surrendering men somewhere, while also lacking real physicality in the press against the Newcastle players, which are a physically and athletically elite team. And Liverpool couldn't match those profiles. It felt like they lost every duel. They were second best in every physical, aggressive battle. I don't want to say Newcastle bullied them, but it did feel like Liverpool were ready to tell the teachers at some point about what they were having to deal with that day. One way it started off was, if we look at here, you get Wirtz and Ekitike piston pressing on the two centre-backs. So Ekitike would start on Burn with Wirtz on Tonali. Nick Pope would then obviously shape up and play it to Cher, who was the free man. You then get Wirtz going up to press Cher with Ekitike then dropping into Tonali because they couldn't allow Tonali to play through as the pivot. The issue with this is, with the time it takes Wirtz to come over and press Cher can then receive the ball, take a touch and play it forward to the front three and get them on the ball or in behind as quick as possible. But if he couldn't play up, then you'd also get Kieran Trippier dropping in a lot deeper, almost alongside the defensive line, with Livramento still operating higher up, making it a little bit asymmetric in those build-up patterns. And this created space for Newcastle to play through as well. Doing this created problems for Liverpool even still, through a number of ways. One, Liverpool maybe not wanting that back three to get outnumbered, so they would go full press high with Ekitike, Wirtz and Gakpo onto the defensive line, and this would leave Tonali free in this area if they couldn't cover that pass. If Newcastle could find an angle, they could quickly switch it to Tonali in space, or Tonali could be allowed to roam from that central area. If the ball's going to the right-hand side, Cher to Trippier, then Trippier could maybe play it up the line to Tonali to receive the ball, turn, drive with it and play his passes forward to that front three looking to get in behind. Or even if it wasn't Tonali coming over, he could still stay a little bit central to play his sort of pivot role. You get Guimaraes coming out into this area here, dragging Jones with him. And Curtis Jones against Bruno Guimaraes it's a mismatch physically. And so the times that Trippier played up to Guimaraes, he just absolutely floored Jones. Jones just couldn't really lay a glove on him, and Guimaraes could get on the ball, hold him off, turn, and play forward in the same way that Tonali did. So as that half wore on and they were getting beaten down the right, you'd see Ekitike coming on to Cher from his start position a little bit more, with Wirtz sticking on Tonali. What this meant was that you asked defensive questions of the most defensively susceptible person in this entire Liverpool team in Mo Salah. So Dan Burn was the free man here. He could then draw Salah into him and look to play a pass over to Livramento, who could come inside or stay outside, depending on what was the most available pass on for whoever was on the ball or where the space was. Salah getting caught in between. Also, Joe Linton can drag Gravenberch up from his position to not only give Livramento more space, but to also create another angle for Burn to play through to Livramento. We can provide a bit of a wall pass option to do that and then have Livramento get on the ball in space with plenty of space in front of him, with the front three looking to push that Liverpool back four back deep into their own half, and Livramento could drive with the ball forward and get into good positions where he could play one of the forward players in to create a goal scoring opportunity. Fantastic with driving with the ball. Livramento is a powerful runner, physically intense, and once he's got a little bit of room to move into, you can't really catch up with him. And Newcastle did a really good job of drawing that Liverpool midfield in a way to create the space that he can use. You end up getting players having to recover, leave their markers to try and close him down. Salah not doing his job well enough at all once the ball goes past him. He's not busting a gut to try and get back, so Livramento didn't have to worry about that. And it was just another way that Newcastle could get up the pitch and use the pace of that front three in behind to create a goal scoring opportunity. And I've also just realised that I've had two Alangas on the pitch this entire time. Oh, that's going to be annoying to look at in the editing process. I'm sorry. And we'll get onto Alanga in a minute, the real Alanga, not the fake Alanga on the far side. And Livramento could use these runs to assist Harvey Barnes by him getting on the ball, looking to drive in at Szoboszlai, which didn't really yield a lot of success. Szoboszlai matched him up well, man for man, and if anything, has probably provided the best fullback display from a Liverpool player this season so far. So Szoboszlai could stop Harvey Barnes. What he couldn't stop was then Livramento overlapping on the left-hand side, without any real help from Salah, who wouldn't track his runner back. Barnes could use that as a decoy to then move inside, as Szoboszlai had to drop and protect that width of the pitch, and Barnes could move inside and help create a Newcastle attack. Or if Livramento moved inside, or if one of the ways on the right-hand side came off and they could play through to the right, then you'd get Elanga one-on-one with Kirkes to receive the ball out wide of him, to run at him, to dribble at him, or through balls in this area in between Van Dijk and Kirkes' defensive anticipation and reading of defensive situations is dreadful. He has been so poor in these first couple games for Liverpool. It's unreal. Even at points where it felt like he had the advantage over Elanga in terms of getting in a better position, it almost looked like he was surprised by the fact that there was a pass maybe going inside or outside of him. He didn't react well, didn't adapt his body shape to keep up. A really, really poor performance. So bad. Gordon could also be a target, and to be fair, Gordon did really well from long ball situations, challenging Gravenberch if the ball went direct from him from the Newcastle box, or Canate, who has had another dreadful game as well. Some real defensive horror shows. And again, just adds to what I was talking about earlier. Physicality in the duels, Liverpool were all over the place. It felt like they lost a good 90% of them throughout the game. The fact that Gordon, who isn't a centre forward, was winning aerial duels against Canati and Gravenberch, and he's a winger, it's not good news for Liverpool. That's a worrying sign. So they could exploit just about every area of that back line. The only thing they really lacked was a box presence, finisher, someone that could get on the end of these chances and put the ball in the back of the net. And who knows, if Alexander Isak was available in this game, would it have been a different story? I personally believe so, and I think Newcastle go on to win this game. But unfortunately, he wasn't. Even in their defensive situations, Liverpool, I thought they were leaving themselves too exposed in the centre of the park. And Joe Linton and Guimaraes did a really good job, while being marked by Jones and Gravenberch, of pushing up high, meaning that Jones and Gravenberch were almost in the defensive line at points, making it a back six, trying to track those runs, trying to track the half spaces. What this did mean was that you left Gakpo, Salah and Wirtz with a lot to do in that midfield. It's not positions they want to be in front of that defensive line without protection of real holding midfielders. And so Tonali could receive the ball in these areas in a little bit of space. Livramento could come inside and get on the ball, maybe even Trippier. There is something really wrong with Liverpool's defensive shape this season. It is not at all compact. They're not making themselves hard to play against. They're physically weaker than it feels like they were last season, losing the duels, aren't pressing well, aren't defending in lower blocks well. They're just conceding space and chances everywhere. How did they approach the game on the ball? Well, we'll get into that now. Newcastle, they're off the ball shape, man to man all over the pitch, where Liverpool had to adapt and shift between markers, and which ultimately ended up with them conceding pressure and conceding possession of the ball. Newcastle didn't have that problem. It was simple, it was aggressive, and it caused Liverpool a lot of problems when trying to play out. And Liverpool, not unlike Newcastle, were direct as well, contributed to the frantic nature of the game, contributed to the old school feel of it by going direct, felt like every time they had the opportunity to. Barnes and Gordon on the centre backs with a Langer on Kirkez, Gamara's on Jones, Joelinton on Gravenberch, Tonali on Wirtz with Shah on Nkatike, Trippier on Gakpo, Burn moving across to Salah, allowing Livramento to come onto Szoboszlai, who would look to invert in front of the defensive line. And to be fair, it felt like that Liverpool midfield three were separated from the centre-back pairing of Liverpool to allow more space maybe for Szoboszlai to come into this position, bring Livramento further in. It meant that Liverpool were quite congested in that central area, and because of Newcastle's man-to-man press, didn't really have a lot on in terms of free men to play to. There wasn't a lot of passing lanes open because of how congested they were. And Szoboszlai coming into this position meant that Livramento had a lot of room to travel from left back in coming up to him. But to be fair to Livramento, I thought he pressed excellently, making the large distances he had to cover not seem that big with the speed he got to Szoboszlai. So whatever advantage they were looking to gain from Szoboszlai inverting, it didn't really come off when Newcastle still had 11 men. And full credit to Tino showing his defensive qualities yet again. I think for me, he has to start for England. I don't think there is a fullback we have that is defensively as good as Livramento. And the only thing I think that this was to serve a purpose for, if not playing out, was creating more isolation for Salah up against Dan Burn with dragging the other Newcastle markers away, meaning they couldn't double up on him if they could get the ball directly to him. The biggest issue was because of Newcastle's press, they couldn't really play the ball on the ground to him, and they had to go direct to him. But again, where there was an issue for Liverpool all game, physically against Dan Burn, Salah is not winning that battle, and the kicks from Alisson weren't that great on occasion. Burn kept touch tight to him. So the further it went away from goal, the further it went wider on the pitch, then Burn could just keep him in that position, challenge him, put him off, and win the resulting throw in, or at least force it out for a throw in, or head it up the pitch if it went in that area. And Salah couldn't really get any joy against Burn, couldn't bring the ball down, couldn't get the time and space to take a touch and get it out of his feet. Again, just pure mismatch. On the other side, however, different story. Gakpo offering a more physical presence up against Trippier was probably the one Liverpool player that consistently won their individual duels throughout this game. With the ball going long to him, I spoke about it in the last Liverpool game I did, how Gakpo was a very underrated wide target man, receiving the ball from deep. And Trippier's reading of long balls is maybe the worst I've ever seen of any fullback ever, getting caught two under it, trying to be too eager and head the ball away and just not getting anywhere near it, allowing Gakpo to run in behind. And especially after the first Liverpool goal, it felt like Trippier lost a lot of composure on that right-hand side, allowing Gakpo a lot more time and space and opportunity with his rash decision-making for him to get through and create something. When Liverpool had Newcastle forced back, it would be in this shape with Gravenberch and Jones as the two pivots, allowing Wirtz to have the centre of the pitch, the attacking midfield zone to himself. The issue is with Newcastle's 4-5-1 mid block is they're very restrictive of the space they allow an opposition team to play through. While they maybe do create space in between that midfield and defensive line, it's a bit of a tease because they just don't allow space in between the midfielders to allow passes through. And even with Jones and Gravenberch maybe trying to sucker the wider midfielders into a press to create a little bit of space for Wirtz, Gamara's and Joelinton and Tonali didn't take the bait, and they couldn't provide the quality to break that shape down. Wirtz not being able to receive the ball meant his ability to search for space just didn't exist. Also, with that block of five protecting that attacking midfield zone, it left very little for a Jones or a Gravenberch or even a Szoboszlai, who would come in a lot more narrow because he obviously is a midfielder by trade, to make movements to create space for Wirtz to move into, just because of how disciplined and how structured that Newcastle shape was. Very, very good defensive display. They annexed their mid block well. It's something that's improved greatly in the Eddie Howe era for Newcastle. But obviously, as we know, Anthony Gordon got sent off. And this made it a lot harder for Newcastle. As opposed to the 4-5-1, it turned into a 4-3-2 with Barnes and Elanga coming up into this position here. It meant that Kirkez could operate higher up, Szoboszlai could maybe take a position higher up, or Curtis Jones could, and Wirtz could come out to this position, with Szoboszlai as the inverted midfielder in here with Gravenberch. And as a result, Newcastle had to be very structured. They couldn't go man-to-man because they were a man down. So that approach wasn't going to work. They go zonal, trying to protect the centre area of the pitch. So Van Dijk came into this position here, and he looked to take the ball out wide if Alanga couldn't get to him, if he was maybe blocking Gravenberg. Gamares would come over, then you get Tonali maybe coming over into this position, Joel Linton. And Newcastle showed great levels of energy to try and restrict space. So even if the ball went to Kirkez, there was no natural player on Kirkez. Gamares could come across, Alanga could, Barnes, and they would do a really good job of trying to block Liverpool from playing through. Obviously, when you have a lesser man advantage against a team that love possession as much as Liverpool, they will get through. They will find space in and around that Newcastle shape. Players will show for the ball. You'll get Jones, you'll get Wirtz finding it and looking to drive forward. But to be fair, I thought the Newcastle back four was excellent in restricting any real opportunity for Liverpool to break through. In fact, as hard as they found it in the first half to break Newcastle down, it seemed harder when they were down to 10 men. That back four could not be penetrated. Salah and Gakpo were really ineffective. Ekitike Barra's goal, which was really well taken, I thought was poor for the most part. So as much as they could bypass the midfield and the attack a lot easier, they couldn't break down that back four. No real runs either from the Liverpool players to test. Wirtz not making movements in the half space of Bosley or Jones. So it felt like they were making an effort to make it easier for that Newcastle back four. And then if they couldn't penetrate, they'd have to go back, and then this would leave Newcastle to counter-pressing, so Szoboszlai receiving it. You then get Joel Linton pressing. You'd even maybe get Dan Burn, who would be that extra man in midfield, pressing with Tonali here, Alanga here, Barnes or Gamares coming into this position here, depending on what the state of play was and if they were trying to lock Liverpool into a side, forcing them back, trying to win the ball, forcing turnovers where they could then get the likes of Barnes and Alanga from the central positions to run outside the centre backs. The Liverpool defenders having to react, challenge Newcastle and force the ball out for a throw-in, give away a corner, give away a free kick. And that's where Newcastle's 2 goals came from. They were still working hard, they were still being aggressive, and they were still showing their high energy levels, even when they were down to 10 men, to try and win the ball back and get up the pitch and score the goals that they did to ultimately get them back into the game. But again, Liverpool rode their luck and got a result which they maybe didn't deserve. But as I said before, as I started off this video, it's not always what you get. But if you've made it to this point in the video, please leave a like if you've liked the video. Comment down below, tell me what you thought. Tell me if there's anything I missed and anything you want to put your input on. Subscribe if you want to see more. In a bit, lads.